Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Breathe Darling, the podcast. I'm your host, Emily Riggs, and I'm so happy that you have returned, or perhaps are listening for the first time, to an episode from the show. I really cannot express how grateful I am to have today's guest on the podcast, and I'm just going to jump right in to tell you about her. So today's guest is Yesim Saldivia, and she is an EMDR certified and IFS trained trauma therapist. EMDR standing for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing Therapy, and IFS standing for Internal Family Systems Therapy. And she's a licensed professional counselor serving adults across Colorado. You can also call her Yish. She specializes in helping people understand the patterns that once protected them but no longer serve them. People-pleasing, hyper-independence, perfectionism, and feeling high-functioning, yours truly, on the outside while also overwhelmed underneath. Her approach integrates EMDR, internal family systems, inner child work, and somatic nervous system-informed therapy to help clients move beyond insight and create meaningful, lasting change. For those looking to accelerate their healing, Yesim also offers therapy intensives that provide dedicated time and space for deeper, more focused work. Clients often describe her as warm, genuine, and easy to talk to. She believes therapy doesn't have to feel cold or overly clinical, and she brings humor, authenticity, and compassion, which you will hear today, into the room while creating a space where clients feel safe enough to do the deeper work. In addition to her clinical practice, Yesim is also a consultant in training, soon to be an EMDR approved consultant. That's a big deal in our world, y'all. It takes a lot of time and effort. And she offers individual and group EMDR consultation to therapists seeking greater confidence, clarity, and competence in their EMDR practice. Outside of the therapy room, Yesim is the happiest outdoors, whether she's tending to her flower and vegetable gardens, hiking, or dreaming up her next adventure. She also loves spending time with her family, friends, and her pets, getting lost in a good book or two, catching a live show, and unapologetically unwinding with a little reality TV. This is why I love Yish, and I think you guys are going to as well. We get into a lot of topics, both as therapists and also as just people with lived experience. We talk about motherhood, grief, being an eldest daughter, lots of things that I think our audience is going to relate to and find really helpful. So be sure to take a listen to today's episode with the one and only Yesim Saldivia. Well, I am just so happy to have you on the podcast today, Yish. This is a dream come true. I feel like there's so many people in the Instagram space that I get to connect with in this way, and I'm so happy that you're one of them.
Thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be here. So excited. I love it.
Yes! Yay! Well, I would love for our listeners to be able to get to know you a little bit more, get to know who you are, what you do, where you are, and even what brings you to the work of therapy.
Yeah. So I am a licensed professional counselor in Colorado. I have a private practice. I specialize in terms of modalities, EMDR and IFS therapy. I really like the holistic approach, and I work with adults primarily, mostly women, a lot of folks who are just recovering from trauma responses like people pleasing, perfectionism, a lot of eldest daughters. Feel really passionate about that.
Yes, which I am really excited for us to get into today as well. I just feel like there's so much overlap in our work, and that's what led me to you. But you're also someone who I follow because I feel like I learn a lot about myself as an eldest daughter. And you just name things really well and really simply. Like you are able to simply identify very complex concepts. Like you post and I'm like, oh, I got to sit with that a minute, but it's just you cooking with a very just phrase over the top. And I'm like, oh, shoot. Okay. Yeah.
Feeling called out, right?
Feeling called out. But I would love to hear you share what brought you to the work of being a therapist. Why did that feel like
an important thing for you?
Growing up, I'm going to like take it back. When I was like a child, everyone always said, you're so sensitive. You're so sensitive. That was something I heard all the time, to the point like it was a fault, not a good thing,
Right.
Yeah. But that also made me super in tune to people and my surroundings and environment. So as I got older, it became a more positive thing. And now I view it as like a superpower, because we are so deeply in tune when you're sensitive. But that made me be able to be there for people and really support them and hear them. And I always got like, I'm the person that everyone comes to talk to about all the things. So post college, as I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to focus on, it just naturally, I just gravitated towards the field of psychology and counseling, because it really made a lot of sense for who I was already in my friends' lives and other people's lives too, and how I showed up.
Yeah. Yeah. Just drawing on those strengths already. Yeah. I get that. I think so many of us come to this work because of either going to therapy and doing some of our own work and, kind of naming what our, say, issues, but like what our own stuff is. And somebody helped us to do that, and we want to help somebody else. It sounds like there was just kind of this like natural progression for you of stepping into the work because of how you're wired.
How I'm wired. And so there's that piece and there's another piece. And that's my own experiences that I went through as a child. Like my parents separated when I was in middle school, and then I had that whole piece, and then they got back together, and then they officially divorced when I was in college. And that really led to a lot of different growth and learning for myself and my own experiences as like my role in the family, which I know we're going to get into more later. But I think that piece of having had my own kind of traumas and experiences really obviously drew me into wanting to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you named at the top just those trauma responses that you support people in understanding and healing from. And you named perfectionism, people pleasing, and eldest daughters. I'm curious if we can get into some of the eldest daughter side of things. I know you and I, we're going to hold some space for talking about motherhood and grief as well. But I just feel like eldest daughterhood, if you will, is having a big moment. We've got lots of this coming out in the pop culture space, songs about this. Taylor Swift, I think Paramore has a song. Yes. And I just feel like it's entering into some of the vernacular, even just in our lay conversations. I was talking to a friend about it the other day, and she's just kind of exploring her role and what that's like. But I'm curious, from your work, how do you see that showing up, this eldest daughter? I've even heard it called syndrome. I was like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
But, just the experience of being an eldest daughter. What are you noticing about that?
And I want to clarify too, in my experience, I am the eldest daughter, but I have an older brother. So it is kind of interesting. But I am still, if you look at the classic, like what is an eldest daughter? The one that is the responsible one, the one who carries so much of the emotional weight in the family, all these things. Like I was 100% that, always really in tuned to people's moods and what's happening. And part of that was my sensitivity too. And I think a lot of eldest daughters have that as well. But I think what it is, there's a huge correlation for people who have experienced trauma. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the big traumas, like a lot of abuse or, like what we think of. But it can also be emotional neglect or not really having people be tuned into you and attuned to what's going on with you and just taking it for granted. A lot of parents, especially parents who aren't really emotionally available, emotionally mature, they're not going to notice that, And as that eldest daughter, you take on the role of taking care of your siblings and the household and all these things. And it has quite an impact on people, as they become adults and then have to navigate what they learned in their younger years. And I see that a lot in therapy with a lot of the clients I work with are typically eldest daughters too. Not all of them, but they often have been in that role.
I'd say that that's a good portion of who I work with as well, who comes to my door. I don't necessarily market myself as someone who works with eldest daughters, but that's who's showing up, right? Right. And I think it's really interesting. You touched on that correlation between eldest daughters and emotional neglect, and then also the emotional immaturity of the parents.
Yeah.
think for many parents of previous generations, they would have seen that very differently. And I'm curious for you, where do you see that line between being a responsible older child versus being almost like parentified?
Right. It's a blurry line sometimes, to be honest.
Right.
It is not clear cut, I feel like. I think it's really maybe related to the impact it has on the individual, right? So if it causes some of these different responses in your life and to the point where you become so hyper independent, so closed off to others, that can cause harm. It can cause you not to be able to maybe have successful relationships sometimes because you're not as open and vulnerable. It's so hard for you to ask for help from others, to rely on other people's support. We all as humans need that. Nobody is superhuman, even though we act like we are. We're not. And we're social beings who need that emotional support. It's got to be more reciprocal. But as the eldest daughter role, you typically go and veer on that side of super hyper independence and really struggle to ask for that because it didn't feel safe. You couldn't do it when you were younger, and so it just becomes automatic when you're adult. So I think when it starts to infiltrate parts of your life as later on, especially as an adult, your work, maybe you're overworking, you're burnt out, your relationships are suffering, things like that. Emotionally, you don't feel fulfilled because you're not getting your needs met. That's when I think we can see it more clearly.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I see it showing up for clients and friends and even myself as resentment because I'll speak for myself, but I have these patterns of behavior that are hyper independent, people pleasing, perfectionistic, leads me to not ask for help, leads me to believe I'm a burden, leads me to believe that there's some kind of weakness in needing other people. Right. But then it also leads me to feel like I have to fight tooth and nail to get my needs met. And I resent being seen as the highly capable, high functioning friend or person. And so this kind of really complex interplay of how I was raised and the responsibilities I was given and the person I'm trying to be and finding that secure attachment, right? Because so much of this is born out of the insecurity of I'm not sure if my needs are going to get met, or I've been told meet your own needs. Somebody else has more important things going on.
Yes. I think it is complex. It really is because there's the desire to be seen and supported. And yet when you haven't had that, it is so hard to really be open to it as well. So it's like this push-pull, I want more of this. Please see me, please do this for me. But then there's a control aspect too, when we're used to being in control, to relinquish that as well. There's that element too. So it is certainly layered. It is definitely layered to be the eldest daughter. And I think that's part of the unpacking as we're adults. How do we start to shift this, within ourselves? How do we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to risk being emotionally hurt? Because that's been a common experience in the past. You know?
Yeah. Even as you were talking, it brought up in me this thought of how making that shift toward maybe what feels more like wholehearted relationships where I can be vulnerable, where I can have needs and someone wants to fulfill them. They're not a burden. How just deeply risky that feels. It's a shift away from my worth comes from what I do and the role I fulfill to my worth is inherent to being a person.
Yes, exactly. And that is really hard for people to wrap their brains around because they are used to this is how I get certain fulfillment. When people recognize my achievements, they recognize, what I do for them versus just who I am as a person, just my authentic self. That feels so scary. I think you hit the nail there. And part of the work is to help people realize that they can experiment in some of these safe relationships that they have now of being more vulnerable and just feeling what that's like and allowing that to grow too.
And the challenge of I can only build connection by being vulnerable. Even these tiny, tiny baby steps at a time are going to help me.
They add up. Those tiny baby steps you can build upon that. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a huge leap,
Yeah.
right away. And that
Yeah.
doesn't feel good anyways. So I think
Yeah.
that's where you start.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you see in your work in terms of like those baby steps? What are we encouraging clients to do to try as we've identified? I'm an eldest daughter. This is how I show up. This is the impact it's having on my relationships. I want something different, but I don't even know where to start. Because I imagine so many of the eldest daughters listening are like, "Yep, you got it right. The nail on the head. What do I do about this? How do I change how I relate to myself and others and the world around me?"
Part of it is, I think, pushing your own boundaries a little bit and becoming a little bit, trying to work towards more flexibility in certain areas. And I'll give the example of like rest, right? Like when you're a driven person and that's how your life has been, again, achievement equals worth. You don't like to rest. You don't like to, you feel guilty. You feel like you're lazy, bad, all these things, And so it's taking time to like build in a little bit of rest and forcing yourself to do that and accepting it. And, again, baby steps is one example. But going back to boundaries, another piece is boundaries with others. That's a common topic that comes up with this population, especially family. And we work out a lot on how do you create boundaries with them, of how do you not jump in the role of being that, couples counselor to your parents or whatever that you're used to doing, like how, and we even like role play a little bit or like rehearse or what can you say to them in this conversation, in this moment where dad's just going off about mom and you're like, it's so inappropriate, but that's been the way it has been for so many years and you're just used to it. But those are some of the things that we tackle too, that current tangible ways to show up,
Yeah. Even talking through boundaries, I know for many of my clients can feel really scary, but that idea of like role playing it and working through it and even addressing, okay, what are you afraid is going to happen? What are you afraid they're going to say? How do we practice this with safe people first who can let us know that they're a safe place to work this out, right? That I'm not going to lose belonging or connection because I tried to set a boundary. Because we know that eldest daughterhood it's not just isolated to our families. I think it shows up in my marriage, my friendships.
Yeah.
Even
absolutely.
as a therapist, like taking on what's not mine to own or be responsible for.
Right.
And believing
that people pleaser.
somehow,
That's the other part. Yep. We didn't mention that one, but that's a big one. That is huge.
Yes, it's huge. And sometimes I sit with like, is this why I have like 3 autoimmune diseases? Like,
it's all just trapped inside. Yeah. There is a
inside.
correlation with women in general and autoimmune disorders.
True.
We know that, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all deeply fascinating. But I love the example that you gave of working on identifying those boundaries that we can set with ourselves and then with other people as well, starting with safe people and then in the context of safety too. If you're in therapy and I hope feel a reasonable amount of safety with your therapist and you can work through that with them and talk that out and be terrified and go to the worst case scenario, but also know that I'm worthy of this.
Right. My opinion, my feelings matter too. They do, right? And we just always assume that that's not as important as the other person in the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, it's so complex. I can imagine, just anybody listening, reflecting on their own situation and having big questions about this. And I wish we could get into every nuanced experience possible. But I do think that there's something here, and a lot of women experiencing this would absolutely benefit from working through it in therapy and finding some space to let their needs be important. And I think that's what the breaking point for so many women who come to my door is, I just can't keep doing it like this anymore.
Yeah.
And they've reached that point, and what's under it is a lot of caregiving others. What's under it is my needs don't matter. What's under it is kind of crippling ambition. And how do we let them matter outside of the roles that they play for other people? It's so hard at times. Yeah.
It is. But it's also such beautiful work. I do love working with this population. And I feel like that relationship, therapeutic relationship, can be so powerful too and so helpful for them to be seen and heard like fully, by somebody for who they are and not for who they're trying to be or who they've been, the role they've had.
Who they're trying to be, who they think people need them to be.
Yeah.
There's so much freedom in starting to explore that. Yes. But I think this is actually a perfect segue into something else that we wanted to talk about today, which is motherhood.
Motherhood. The big umbrella of motherhood. Oh,
yes. Big,
so many
complex
things.
Yeah, it is. It is. What's your experience of motherhood been up to this point? You've got a couple kiddos, right?
I do. And quite a range of age. My youngest is 8 and my oldest is 15. I have an oldest daughter. Irony of that. I have an eldest daughter who is already showing signs and has been for a long time. And I'm like,
Isn't that
man,
interesting?
I try so hard to shift some things, but it's almost like innate sometimes. I think because of the nurturing role of women, girls to begin with. I think there's that piece too. It's not all on the families, but they exasperate it, obviously, But yeah, I have 2 kids, quite a big age gap. That's kind of related. It wasn't intentional, but we did have some secondary infertility issues. So that took a while to actually have my boy. So, but it's been quite the journey, quite the ride being a parent for sure.
Yeah. How do you feel like your experience of motherhood has changed over time? And again, you've got this unique experience of having some space between your kiddos. I don't know about you, but most people in my proximity, it's 2 to 3 years in between siblings, if there are siblings, right? That seems to be the culturally upheld ideal. But yeah, just curious about your experience of motherhood, how that's been for you.
All the stages feel so different. I mean, first off, I feel like the cliche of it goes by so fast is absolutely true. And, the days are long, the years are short. Oh my gosh, it's like a blink. You blink and then they're 3, 5, blink again, they're 10. It's wild.
Yeah.
It is like the most difficult, challenging job role ever to be a parent, I feel like. And ultimately super rewarding and amazing too. But we can't like downplay how hard it is. I can see why people choose the child-free route as well during this. It feels like really more common now than ever. When I was younger, nobody was really going that route intentionally. But I just think that if more mothers just had an opportunity to be supported early on, especially realistically with some of the challenges all the way from like post-birth, labor birth to all the different things that come up, it would be so much better for them in their mental health because so much isn't spoken about. It's always like, just you're a mother, so you should love everything. It's wonderful, but it can be really, really, really hard. And I'm sure we all have our experiences and challenges with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me, and I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, I also experienced infertility and postpartum just due to a history of trauma, particularly with losing my mom. Like depression and anxiety just showed up in really heavy and hard ways. And I think as I'm doing my own processing around that experience, a lot of the eldest daughter perfectionist people pleaser came out because it was like, well, I don't want to look like I can't handle this. What would that mean about me? It would mean that I failed at becoming a mom, right? If this is hard, and I know that that's not how we talk about it, right? That like, if it's hard, that doesn't mean you failed. But almost like you were describing your daughter, so much of it is almost innate.
Right.
And to me,
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of pressure on me growing up to be perfect, but there was an expectation that you do well, that you work toward excellence, and that you kind of course correct if you have, in fact, fallen short. But that showed up for me in early motherhood in a really big way. And I still find it showing up. I have a 2-year-old, and perfectionism looks more like doing it right.
Right.
That there's some right way to do it. And that if I choose this sleep training, I'm doing it wrong. If I do baby-led weaning, I'm doing it wrong. If I do purees, I'm doing it wrong. If I do, if I put her in swim lessons, I'm doing it wrong because they put her head underwater. It's just like constant influx of, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? I'm curious, as someone just that much further down the line, as you kind of reflect on being an eldest daughter, becoming a parent, even the secondary infertility challenges, how do you relate to the versions of you that you've been throughout motherhood?
Gosh. I mean, the first versions were, I don't know what I'm doing. I hope I'm doing it right. It's like, I want to do it. I want to do it right. I want to be that mother who's, showing up a certain way. And you look at your own, I mean, this is the biggest thing too about being a mother or a parent in general, is it's a mirror to your own childhood. Like, you have to then reflect back on how you were raised, even though you don't necessarily want to go back there. It makes you go back there because you can't help it, as you are deciding these choices of do I do this? Do I do that? How do I, decide to discipline or all the things? And I think I look back and I'm trying to have compassion towards my different versions of me. For sure, the second felt a little bit easier in some ways, just because it's not the first kid. You have a little bit more wiggle room. You feel more comfortable with everything. And I think that I've heard is true with each kid, but they're different. One's a girl, one's a boy. And, they're different personalities. So each kid, you're parenting a new version, a new, something different. And that has its challenges in and of itself. Every age has its own challenges. Yes, they get older and more independent. That's easier. And oh my gosh, teenage years, all the different things that could come up then. It's wild. I have someone who's driving now. That's terrifying and also amazing. It's both. There's a lot of the both ands parenting, I feel that we hold,
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to hold compassion, not just for my my versions of me as a mother before, but who I am now. That we are all always doing the best we can in every given moment. And we can try to do better, but perfection isn't the answer. Perfection doesn't exist. And that part I know logically, but I have to remind myself because I fall into that,
Yeah. So you've got an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old. What are you enjoying the most about these seasons with them, individually and collectively? And just acknowledging they're in different age groups and developmental stages.
But interesting. I love their interactions. For having such an age gap, they actually do get along really well. And my daughter has been watching my son a lot this summer, and they play together well. They do all these activities. There's so much love there, and it is so sweet. And he adores her. So that just melts my heart seeing that, Yeah. He's still my baby, even though he's 8 and a bit older kid. But he's my baby. And I'm just try to hold on to that as much as possible. Just so much energy, goofy, funny, fun guy. And my daughter, it's so we have a lot of fun, and he brings me, back to that child part a lot, being around him. My daughter, it's so cool because I'm seeing her become this young woman as she has her own thoughts and feelings about all kinds of things. And she can speak to me like an adult, even though I know she's not an adult and I'm not trying to make her one, but
Yep.
Yeah, but it's the same time, it's wow, I can see who you're becoming. And obviously you're going to continue to evolve, but that is so amazing to watch that and see that. Really her slowly becoming more comfortable with who she is, or, just want her to be her authentic self too. But I know in teen years, it's fitting in is all, so important, all these things.
Yeah. I feel being those ages, you can also reflect a little bit more on what it was like for you. And I know so many people of our generation are deeply committed, particularly in this space of people who had experienced trauma, big T or little t, during childhood, really are just deeply committed to doing it differently. And maybe the template that we were handed around parenting, we don't agree with. It really wasn't right. It was not the best way. And how do we show up differently for our kids? And I think on the flip side, for anyone who maybe would look back and say, I had a great childhood, they're probably going to still do some things differently than their parents did. But I sense for our generation and those coming up behind us, there is this really intense intentionality that I think is so beautiful. But for the eldest daughters and those like us, it can border on perfectionism.
Yeah.
Do you see that at all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Of course, it is so hard to fight against that. And again, like I said even earlier, it's my logical brain knows that doesn't exist. And yet my emotional mind expects that of me. I still push that perfectionism, whether it's parenting or other parts of my life too. But I have to constantly challenge that belief. And tell myself, like, we are doing the best we can in this moment, because ultimately we are a product of our own childhood as well as what we're trying to learn and grow and do now. But again, what is the one right? There is no one right way either. And with parenting, I think this is especially true because, again, each of your children are going to be different. What worked for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. So that's where, that flexibility and compassion comes in, because it's going to look different. They are their own people, and it's not necessarily the same thing,
Yeah. It's not a copy paste scenario.
No. Like, you try that and then you're like, but that's not working for this kid. I guess not working at all. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, man. Well, I know that for both of our stories, the experience of motherhood also holds grief. And I know that's also another area that you specialize in. And I just wanted to hear from you about parenting and grief and how that shows up for you, how you have processed that in your own life.
Yeah. So I experienced quite a bit of grief around the time of trying to have a second child, because we were having like early miscarriage, chemical pregnancies, and then I had one ectopic pregnancy, and it was just taking so long. I wasn't sure it was going to happen. I was hoping, but it was really devastating every time it didn't work out. And around that same time, I lost my father. Actually, it was right before, well, it was probably correlating with some of the losses, 2015. And that was a huge, huge loss. And just trying to navigate my feelings around losing him. And we had a complex relationship. There was love there, but there was also a lot of other things like frustrations and sadness about our relationship. And then another loss of like my children not getting to know their grandfather on some level. So I had to just kind of move through those feelings and emotions, and while trying to also bring life and create this life for myself and family that I really wanted so desperately.
Yeah, I've been just sitting with all that you were going through. One loss is more than enough, right, to claim grief. But then, to layer that on, it sounds like that was a particularly heavy time, especially as you're trying to mark this transition into having two children, and the pursuit of that takes its toll.
Right. Yeah, it was a really, really difficult period for sure in my life. And as you know, like, grief continues and morphs and changes as time goes by. I mean, it's been over 10 years now. Going to go on year 11 of my dad passing, which is wild, because in some ways it feels like forever. In some ways it feels like it hasn't been that long at all, and that's just how grief always is. But you just kind of continue to move through it each day. When something comes up, I try to honor whatever that feeling is and noticing it and paying attention to it, whether it's related to my relationship with my dad, either missing him, or whatever feeling I have related to him, just noticing that and trying to move through that is really important, I think, in the grief work that we do.
Yeah. When you say kind of move through it, can I ask what you mean by that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if I'm feeling, for instance, sadness, that I let myself have space to cry, or I give myself space to just think about him, or be in. A lot of times for me with my dad, I feel connected to him most outside in nature. So when I'm doing certain things like a backpacking trip or something where I have like space to myself, I kind of will really have those moments of connection. And I just try to allow myself to feel any energy presence, or those, again, sadness, or maybe it's gratitude. It's not just sadness, gratitude for the connection in that moment, for instance. I'm going to let that come through. And another way would be, my dad and I were very different politically in our views. And that was one of our struggles in our relationship. There's relief I feel sometimes in the times that we live politically, that he's not here and we don't have to butt heads so much about that, or what would our relationship look like if he was here, because we would have to have either super big boundaries around it, or I wouldn't be talking to him that much,
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful thing to notice, that there's almost relief in that way, that we're not having to navigate those waters together, because it's tumultuous. I mean, it's so heavy right now, and I mean, when has it not been in the last several years? But, you know,
Yeah.
it's just, I think that's a really interesting thing that you're noticing
Yeah.
for you
Yeah.
and giving
And so
yourself
like,
permission.
right, exactly. Not be beating myself
Mm,
up for being like, what, you're have relief that he's not here. And it's like, well, no, that's actually, it's just is what it is. It's the truth. I know it would be extra
mm,
hard and complicated as it was before, but even more
mm,
so because I have feelings about what's happening right now that are even stronger than before, So, and I can
mhm,
just recognize that. Again, it could be both. Like, I still miss him, I still love him, and I can recognize that it is easier to not have to deal with his beliefs when he's not here.
mhm. I think something
Yeah.
really powerful that you just named is the idea of telling the truth about our grief. Because I
Hmm.
feel like, despite the fact that, we're just busting up mental health stigma left and right. I mean, we're talking about mental health way more than I know
Hmm.
I grew up hearing about it.
Yeah.
And it was still very hush hush. And we used very harsh language to talk about people who were struggling with their mental health. But I
Hmm.
love that we're in this place of talking more openly about things. And still, these myths, these misconceptions about mental health, grief in particular, as to people who work in that space, I just feel like they're still very pervasive. And this idea that you just named, I'm going to tell the truth about what my grief experience is, not
Right.
what someone else thinks it should be, not
Hmm.
what I think it should be, not a milestone I think I should have arrived at this point. I'm
Hmm.
curious what you see come up either for yourself or in the work that you do around myths or misconceptions that people hold about grief.
There's so many, but as you were
Mm,
speaking, something that came to mind had a cultural aspect to it because I
mm,
grew up second generation Turkish American. So
okay.
my parents came from Turkey, and like a piece of that is really respecting your elders, respecting your parents.
Mhm,
It's huge.
mhm,
And so kind of going with that would be like, they passed away. You can't speak negatively about them. It has to be all positive. It has to, we have to honor them. And it's like, yeah, I can honor aspects of somebody, but I'm not going to deny at this point in my life the other pieces that were there. And so
mhm.
that is something that I recognize and I think is huge. And that kind of goes to generational pieces too, cultural and generational. Like with clients, there's a lot of generational trauma that we work through as well. And there's grief around that and a lot of
Yes.
cycle breakers that I work with that I love doing that kind of work. Everyone's unique. Their journey is unique with
Mm,
grief. Even if there are similarities, everyone's going to have a different experience. And it really has to do with their own beliefs around grief, how they were raised, their own specific losses. Like we can't ever expect it. We can't put a general, this is how it's going to be. And so I think just showing up and supporting each person as they are is so important with that.
yeah. Even as you were sharing about your journey with infertility, I was reminded of this idea of disenfranchised grief,
Mm-hmm.
that there are losses that we don't recognize as much as we would recognize the death of someone, right? Of a parent, for
Yeah.
example, right?
Mm-hmm.
That feels like this really evident thing to be grieving, something that
Mm-hmm.
is permissible. But then
Right.
there's other experiences that are swept under a rug or largely dismissed as being grief worthy. I think
Yeah.
about things like grieving the life that you thought you'd have and you don't, grieving the loss of a job, grieving that a job didn't pan out, grieving a breakup,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if you weren't married, right? There's this
Mm.
idea that
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you'll find somebody. There's another other fish in the sea, right? But we
Mm-hmm.
sort of take away from people the permission to feel something about those
Yeah.
things, or don't feel too much about that. What do you mean you can't get out of bed? It was just ... right? We're
Right.
very quick to
Right.
like, I think culturally like minimize experiences.
That's because I
As
think truly people's discomfort with grief. We've come a long way,
there it is.
but
There it is.
yeah, we still struggle with being comfortable, around somebody who
Yeah.
is in their grief, even if they're not emoting. Like we don't know what to say, what to do, how to be there for them, or we feel bad for them. So then we don't like want to talk about it. Or we think it's going to be making things worse if we bring it up. But if it's a loss that they're struggling with, more than likely it's already on their mind and heart. So bringing it up just shows that you care. And it's not a bad thing. And if
Yeah.
they don't want to talk about it, they'll let you know and then you move on. But if they do, you're giving them space to just permission to feel what they're feeling. And that is a huge gift, I feel like.
I cannot agree more, because I find that, and this is where, I don't know about you, I almost have to challenge myself that what we do is not necessarily normal. Like, I always joke, like, we have very weird jobs, right? Like, we're like, yes, please sit down. Tell me everything about your life that you wouldn't share with anyone else. And obviously there's so much relationship built there before we get to that point. But it is a very strange thing to unabashedly hold space for someone else's emotions all day long. That's not, I think I take for granted that that's not something that most people do. That's not something that most people are accustomed to doing. And so it's hard to hear that someone hasn't felt supported in their emotions, because, again, what we do almost feels so common because we do it so often. But reminding myself that that's not a natural that people have, this ability to sit with someone in their pain and not fix it and just let it be exactly what it.
Yeah. Fix it, minimize it, or shut it down. I feel like that's another common one. So I think we are a very grief illiterate society, and it's getting better, but we still struggle with it so much.
I completely
agree.
I
mean, I try to support, like, I try to help people who are even helping others grieving, like friends of mine, maybe. I'm going to make sure, because they sometimes even ask me, like, what can I do? I try to give them ideas or how to be, that it's like, it's not about saying the perfect right thing as much as it is just showing up and being a safe space and place for their feelings and what they're going through.
Yeah. It's something I've learned so much about in my own experience, like what has been helpful, what hasn't been helpful, and how I've felt deeply loved and how I've felt deeply abandoned in my grief. And how do I intentionally use that experience to hopefully support somebody else in their own journey, whether it's a client or a friend or a family member. Because it is something that I think you named it so perfectly. We were very quick to minimize it, to try and fix it, or to, I'm forgetting the last thing that you named.
Shutting down, like, because you
shutting
can't
it down.
deal with it.
Exactly.
It's too much, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm uncomfortable sitting with your pain. So I'm going to take matters into my own hands to fix, minimize, or shut it down. Right. And it's just so unfair to that other person, but then also to yourself, right? Your ability to grow and expand and learn how to sit with an emotion. Yeah,
and ultimately, everybody is going to experience grief to different levels. But 100%, if you're going to be on this planet for a while, you're going to experience grief. It's part of life. And so to also learn not just how to be there for others, but to, when I say like move through it, it means not denying your feelings, not pretending it's not there, honoring what your experience is, the good, the bad, all of it. And I think that is so important to learn to do that yourself too.
Couldn't agree more. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we have covered lots today. I'm curious, just as you reflect on our time together, what do you want listeners to walk away remembering?
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of different topics here that we covered. I think I want them to remember that we're all a work in progress as humans. We all are messy and have lives that are chaotic and busy and full of all different kinds of experiences. And that perfection isn't what it's all about. It's really about trying to connect to our authentic selves and be who we are and whatever that looks like, the beautiful mess that we may be, but just honoring our own authentic selves and working towards that, I think, is the message I would want folks to look at.
Yeah, I feel like you embody that so well, at least from, what I see you share and how you show up. So thank you for modeling that for anyone who follows you. I want everyone listening to go over and check you out and to learn so much more about what you offer and your expertise, because you just have so much richness that you share. A question that I ask every single guest or at least I try to when I remember. Just in the heart of Breathe, Darling, we're having conversations that help us breathe a little easier.
Mhm.
I would love to hear what's helping you breathe a little easier these days.
Ooh, for me, I think what's helping me, this without going into a huge another topic, because I
Yeah.
am growing and exploring myself some more as I am trying to navigate like a whole, like, do I have ADHD? Do I not? I'm trying to learn about
Mm.
it more. Is just embracing where I'm at right now, trying to understand like what I've been through before without judgment, without judging the experiences, and just trying to be curious and get to know what's really going on. So that's helping
Yeah.
me, coming from a place of non-judgment and curiosity
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
doing that the best I can. And I think that's really helpful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I feel like a lot of
Mm,
people are going to receive some good encouragement from that and just be
I hope
reminded to
so.
do the same for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, thank you so much for being on the podcast, for sharing with us from such a vulnerable and deeply personal space, but also from your expertise, your hard fought for training, and just what you've learned from your work with your clients. It's a gift.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here and for having this wonderful podcast platform that you offer for people to learn and grow from, because I think it really is a gift to people too. So thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, lady.
Thank you all for listening to or watching another episode of Breathe, Darling, the podcast. It is my joy to bring these episodes to you and to share with this community the amazing group of people that I get to call friends and colleagues here in the mental health space. Although this is not solely a podcast about mental health, I think that the topics we bring are important across the board for what people are walking through, what they're experiencing, what they're trying to make sense of. So if you found today's episode helpful, or any of the episodes that you've listened to so far, we would love it if you would rate and review today's episode, and go ahead and follow us on social media, Emily Riggs Therapy and Breathe Darling Podcast over on Instagram, and head over and subscribe on YouTube. It helps us so much to know who is listening, and that helps us to better tailor what we're providing in terms of the content and the kind of topics that we're bringing to the table. But at the end of the day, we're just so grateful that you've taken the time to listen, and that today's episode hopefully helped you breathe a little easier. So in the meantime, friends, take good care, be kind to yourself, and breathe easy.